All Rise News. Adam, there is a major update in the Epstein scandal that I wanted to talk to you about. We just have this breaking news from court right now. NBC had attempted to unseal the identities of two people who Epstein had wired six-figure transfers of money to after the Miami Herald had kind of exposed his whole scheme. That effort was just brought in court by NBC News to get the identities revealed. We now have an update in court. Can you explain what just happened?
What just happened was a federal judge rejected the application by NBC News to unseal the identities of the recipient of that money, two recipients, individuals one and individual two. Now, the reason for that ruling is almost as interesting as the ruling itself. Now, there's been a mystery in the Epstein case since 2019, and you explained it perfectly, Brian. The mystery has been who received these payments, a $100,000 payment and a $250,000 wire transfer after the Miami Herald and Julie K. Brown exposed Epstein's scheme in an investigative series called Perversion of Justice. Everything came crashing down, and in the days that followed, two people received these very large wire transfers. And the people who were opposing the unsealing of their identities were the government, the Trump administration, but also, interestingly enough, two of the most prominent attorneys for Jeffrey Epstein victims who represent hundreds of victims. And what's at play here is a kind of tension between two values that people hold in the Epstein case, that we want transparency over the case and we want to protect the identities of the victims. And the reason the victims' lawyers stepped forward is very interesting.
And so, can we talk about that a little bit? Because I'm not surprised to see that the Trump administration opposed this effort, because this whole time they've been engaged in this obfuscation effort where they claim that they want transparency while at the same time simultaneously engaging in the same cover up of that whole issue that they claim they want transparency on. And so they'll say that they want the Epstein files released. Pam Bondi says that they're on her desk. Ultimately, she decides not to release them and then claims that they didn't exist in the first place. They say that they want the grand jury testimonies released, and so they bring it to a judge knowing full well that a judge doesn't have the authority to release those testimonies. But if they wanted those testimonies released, those are contained, that and more are contained within the files themselves that the Attorney General already has access to. And so we're getting a lot of a lot of runaround from this administration. So I get why they would be engaged in an effort to obfuscate who these two six-figure payments went to. But why are two of the attorneys who represent some of the victims also opposing this effort?
So you have it exactly right, Brian. On the one hand, the Trump administration has unquestionably stood in the way of transparency in this case. We've seen it again and again, including the grand jury records, which were a diversion, in the words of two federal judges. The lawyers for the victims basically calls attention to the nature of Jeffrey Epstein's criminal conspiracy. Remember, prosecutors and law enforcement called what Jeffrey Epstein did a pyramid scheme of sexual abuse. And that involved paying victims hundreds of dollars for massages that escalated into sexual abuse. And then they were sent as recruiters for other victims and paid more money for that. There are people who became his assistants. And there has been a controversy that's been playing out for many years. Were a couple of those assistants victims themselves? One of them, for example, it was reported that Jeffrey Epstein said that he purchased her, in his words, from her family in Eastern Europe when she was a teenager. And so the long road of grooming a victim and recruiting them into his criminal conspiracy has been something that has played out before. And what a federal judge found today is that law enforcement at the time said that a couple of these people have one, received death threats because they were suspected by online sleuths and others of being the recipients of these payments. And that law enforcement said that they were badly victimized themselves and misidentified in, folks might remember, the notorious non-prosecution agreement that said that not only Epstein, but some of his potential co-conspirators would be shielded from prosecution. Now, the people who were named as potential co-conspirators, it was revealed in 2019, were recipients of these funds. So you had at least two individuals in this pretty narrow pool. The non-prosecution agreement lists four names, and people put the pieces of the puzzle together. They received death threats. And one of the interesting things about this ruling is that it suggests vindication, at least so far as the government, lawyers for the victims, and a federal judge is concerned. But their identities are shielded. We don't know, for the sake of the privacy of the victims, who just got cleared today.
Yeah. So is there a world in which you have very strange bedfellows here where two of the attorneys are looking out for the privacy of their clients, and the Trump administration is looking to basically obfuscate any sunlight, any daylight onto this stuff, and so both of them were looking to oppose this motion for some exposure here at the hands of NBC News.
Well, there's one thing that I will point out to your question, Brian. The person who argued the motion for the government was not any of Epstein's prosecutors or Maxwell's prosecutors. It was the Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, the same person who joined the effort for the grand jury records. So there are multiple interests at play here. Yeah, I mean, it goes to what I was saying earlier. The Trump administration throughout this whole, uh, throughout the entire second term of his presidency has been uh, standing in the way of transparency. And this time it also happened to intersect with the interests of certain people who are represented by lawyers for the victims.
Can I also have your reaction to the fact that furthering exactly what you were saying, we had Kash Patel show up at a congressional testimony today, and when he was asked about the prospect of these clients existing, these other clients existing, he said that to his knowledge there weren't any, which strikes me as so bizarre that you have over 1,000 victims here, and if we were to believe what Kash Patel is saying, all of those people were isolated solely to the abuses of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and that nobody else was involved. And this seems like exactly the kind of thing that Kash Patel, in his podcaster capacity, and Dan Bongino in his podcaster capacity, and Trump World in their campaign capacity, whether it's Don Jr., Trump himself, Pam Bondi, Alina Habba, all would have scoffed at, and now they're the ones perpetuating this very notion.
Right. And there is a vast public record of people accusing Jeffrey Epstein's famous and powerful friends of sexual misconduct. There's indications of that in some of the litigation against the banks. There is some of that in some of the defamation lawsuits. This is why people want transparency.
Right.
And I would say that Kash Patel, to your point, you're absolutely right. This is a sort of thing that he and Dan Bongino would speculate about outrageously on their podcasts. And right now, they're trying to make it seem like no one has accused anyone but Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell of crimes. That just is not the case. And there is transparency over these issues that can be that the federal government has the power to shed light on. Right now, there's an effort in Congress to try to get the financial records of the banks to find out what their role in this, to trace the payments to people who may be implicated in that. And so it seems to me that someone who has that information that would have a lot more credibility right now than Kash Patel, who has spent the past weekend live tweeting an investigation before the facts are all in. Uh, why not have more transparency over the financial records of Jeffrey Epstein? And it sounds to me like Kash Patel is just repeating the nothing to see here ethos that we saw from the DOJ and FBI memo from July, and people rightly aren't having it. They want more transparency.
Well, there's certainly more to come on the Epstein situation as it continues to unfold. You'll continue to have the Trump administration try and obfuscate the facts surrounding this case, and you'll continue to have these media organizations, the victims themselves, and Democrats continue to push for the release of all of the documents contained within the Epstein files. So, Adam, I know that you have been covering this relentlessly. For folks who are looking to learn more about it, where can they follow your work?
Thank you very much, Brian. You can follow my work at www.allrisenews.com, www.allrisenews.com, also on Substack, and hit subscribe on there, and you can find out I'll be sending dispatches straight from the courts, telling the full story as it comes in.
Adam has been an amazing resource for me, for everybody online. So if you're looking to support fearless independent journalism, this is an amazing outlet to choose. Again, I'll put the link to All Rise News right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Highly recommend, if you are not yet subscribed, to go ahead and subscribe. Adam, appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, Brian. Always a pleasure.